Hey there, welcome to the latest episode of the Campus Comics Cast. This is Dan Brown, and I'm joined this time by
Scott Reed
and Mike Atchison.
And we got a few different topics to go over this time. We're going to continue our look at characters who are having their 80th anniversary this year, and kind of talk about a story we like, or maybe a key story from their history. I think we're going to talk a little bit about what we've all been reading. I'm probably going to talk about how behind I am on my reading. And I think, for the season, we're all going to talk about a Christmas story or like a holiday story. I know we did that last year, but we could do it again because the holidays are happening again this year, Scott. And just, quick reminder for everybody, we are still doing this all remotely, safely from our homes. So if there's any technical glitches or something weird going on, you get what you pay for. But the store is open. I know things have been kind of weird, like stuff opening up, stuff shutting down, but the store is still open. You can come by and check us out at 816 East Main Street, Suite B in Carbondale, Illinois. And we're open Tuesday through Saturday, 11 to 5. And if you want to call before you come in, the number is 618-457-6011. And, of course, we will do curbside or anything like that if somebody wants to, if they don't want to actually come into the store, And you can also find us on Facebook and Twitter. So I think we're going to start off here with, I think we've all selected a Green Lantern story to talk about this time for that character's 80th anniversary. Now, I guess technically it's the 80th anniversary of Alan Scott, the OG Green Lantern. Yep. But, there have been a lot of Green Lanterns over the years and different iterations, and, they're all valid. It's all, somebody's Green Lantern. So I don't know if anyone has an Alan Scott story, but I know I don't.
I did not either.
But yeah, who wants to go first with this?
I nominate Mike to go first on this one.
Mike, okay. Mike, that sound good? You want to tell us about your Green Lantern story?
You guys are too kind. I mean, you must be able to see me chomping at the bit all the time. Right. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I'm sure the rug will be pulled out from under me at some point. So,
well, you are the only one of us who's actually wearing a Green Lantern shirt right now.
Oh, so, that's true.
I'm not wearing my ring on right now that I'm usually wearing.
You usually do. Well, my favorite Green Lantern story is not an epic story. It's not what you'd call something that ran across several issues or was from or is about a Green Lantern that everyone knows about. In fact, it doesn't. It's not a story that centers on Hal Jordan or even Guy Gardner or John Stewart or Alan Scott. But it is written by somebody that's this story. Once I talk about it, I'm sure a lot of people will recognize it. It's but at least first I want to say one of the things I like about Green Lantern is there are so many choices for readers, both in the Green Lantern characters themselves and in the types of the stories, depending on your age or the era of your prolific comic reading. You can choose from literally dozens of Green Lanterns, like Dan said, and that's even before the rest of the emotional spectrum lanterns came into play. So anyway, my story that I'm picking is from Green Lantern Annual number 3. That's volume 2, of course, and that's from 1987. And I'm probably, like I said, not alone in loving this story because it's been reprinted a few times. It's called In Blackest Night, from the infinite imagination of Alan Moore and art by Bill Willingham. Katma is dispatched to the Obsidian Deeps, where there's no natural light. Her mission is to find a protector for that system to enlist into the Green Lantern Corps. Her ring leads her to a suitable candidate named Rot Lop Fan. But since the beings in this sector, there's no light and they evolved without, a need for sight and no eyes, etc., they don't even have a concept of light or color, and he can't understand what Katma Tui is trying to explain to her what a Green Lantern is. In fact, the words green and lantern don't even translate into his language without that concept of color or light. So, and this is only I think this is a 10-page story. It's pretty short. Katma Tui is basically, the story is all about her trying to figure out how to connect and communicate with Rotlop Fen, and it dawned on her that there's more than one kind of ring. She gives Rotlop Fen basically a Green Lantern ring, but instructs him on the creation of an F-sharp bell, which he considers the most resonant of the notes. So he uses his willpower to create a bell, or the device that will emit sound waves and then convert them to solid forms. So instead of using light to do constructs, he's using sound. And my favorite part of the story, I think, was where they concocted an appropriate oath, which is, as we know, is really important to being a Green Lantern. And it goes as follows: in loudest din or hush profound, my ears catch evil's slightest sound. Let those who toll out evil's knell beware my power, the F-sharp bell. Now, only a true geek could really, enjoy that. So, Katma, she creates him a Green Lantern uniform with a bell symbol on the front instead of lantern, and then she goes back and she reports to the Guardians that she's completed her mission as best as she can, at least. And they say, well, we have to make our decision, and she says, well, so let me know as soon as you can. And they make a joke by saying, this one Guardian says, we'll try not to keep him in the dark too long. And the final panel is her, like 3 days later, realizing that the Guardians just made a joke, and for the first time she realized it. So, and I said it was 10 pages. It's actually only 6 pages long. So it's pretty innovative, easy to read, really enjoyable. And these kind of little nuggets like this, man, I dig, and I could read a lot of them. So there, of course, the annuals back at that time were called, it was Green Lantern Annual, but the theme was Tales of the Green Lantern Corps. So, and they had a mini series about that time as well. So yeah, that's my story.
Well, I think I'll go next, because I think mine kind of picks up on some of the similar themes that Mike had in his. And yeah, I mean, for me, again, I wear a Green Lantern ring like every day, just in life. But for me, Hal Jordan is really kind of the sort of weakest link in the whole Green Lantern story. I really like the concept of the Corps and the alien worlds. I think there's a lot of ground there to cover. When Jeff Johns started his run on the book, he was saying that like Green Lantern has the potential of like Star Wars, where there is a whole universe here. You have whole sectors of space that have nothing to do with Earth. There's a lot of potential to mine there that I don't feel like we get very often. I feel like really there should always be a Green Lantern Corps book in addition to whatever Green Lantern book they're doing. There's just so much story potential there, and it's an expansive world that I don't feel like they've ever really developed well enough. And I think what Johns ended up doing with the emotional spectrum, it did some world building, but it still really kind of narrowed the focus of the books. And I feel like there's what's going on in the rest of the universe while they're doing this sort of infighting with other Lantern Corps. But so for a lot of those reasons, I suppose that's why I picked the book I did. So what I'm going to be looking at is a story from Green Lantern Corps Quarterly, #1. And so this was an anthology book from the early 90s that did a lot of short stories about other members of the Lantern Corps, like sort of throughout the universe. And, there was some Alan Scott in there and different things too, but I really just sort of, an early chance to sort of develop the world or the universe of Green Lanterns more. So the story I'm going to be talking about is called Laying Down the Law, and this is by John Ostrander and Flint Henry. And so the story starts with a sort of aquatic Green Lantern showing up to the planet Garnet, which apparently is also just colloquially known as Hellhole. So this is the baddest world in the universe. It's sort of run by outlaws. And this new Green Lantern makes his presence known, saying, hey, I am the authority here. I'm here to clean up the town, the planet, basically. And this purple-skinned alien named Trosk shows up and dispatches with the Green Lantern pretty quickly. And we find out that this outlaw uses gold bullets. And so this is back in a time when the Green Lantern ring still had the yellow impurity, and they were, defenseless against anything yellow. So, he's not going to stand up to gold bullets, unfortunately. And so, as dying Lanterns are supposed to do, he sends his ring on to find a successor as he dies. And the ring lands at the feet of this sort of ne'er-do-well character called Jack T. Chance. And so this is just sort of another sort of rough around the edges, sort of low-life character here on Garnet, who the ring goes to. And immediately, as per his sort of standard, when someone gets a Green Lantern ring, the ring puts the uniform on him. Jack says he will not wear a uniform, and the ring instructs him that he has to be, he has to have a designation. He has to let people know that he's a Green Lantern. So he's like, okay, put a badge on me. So it just puts a badge of the Green Lantern emblem on his lapel of his jacket. So Jack realizes the power he has now, and sort of tears his way through this sort of criminal underworld of Hellhole. We get some pretty violent montages here, and again, this is kind of why you have Flint Henry on a book, is to do this sort of cartoonish, kind of over the top violence and stuff like that. And everything's going pretty well for him until he runs afoul of Trosk again now, who has heard that there's a new Green Lantern, even though he just killed Green Lantern. So Jack is pinned and kind of tells his ring to just eliminate Trosk, and the ring tells him he's not allowed to use lethal force. At which point, Jack just picks up a gun and shoots Trosk himself, without the Green Lantern ring. I think it's interesting to know, and again, I'm sure this isn't intentional or anything, but there is sort of a thing with a more recent Green Lantern. Simon Baz carried a gun for quite a while too when he got the ring. So it's not just be solely dependent on that. Again, that's just something I'm noting here. I'm sure that didn't influence anything they did with Simon Baz. Just sort of a notable thing there. You don't see too many Green Lanterns using actual guns. Maybe a construct or something. But after Jack kills Trosk, his ring flies him back to Oa. But again, we find out on the way, Jack tries to stop the ring from going at warp speed because he gets warp sickness. So as he is landing on Oa, he's sort of throwing up and then sort of drop down in front of the Guardians, who is explaining to him that he can't, conduct himself the way he has been. So he's like, fine, take the ring. I don't need the hassle. But then they realize, well, he is getting results on this planet. And Jack tells him that, you can't send a good guy to take care of these bad guys. You need another bad guy. So again, it's sort of shades of Guy Gardner here with this character, but really sort of a rougher, more violent version. And the Guardians realize that, yeah, every Green Lantern we send to this planet gets killed. So they think that, maybe Jack has a point. So they say, hey, you get the ring back, but we're going to be watching you. You're going to be subject to reviews and, that kind of thing. And he's like, fine. And so he heads back to the planet as sort of the official Green Lantern now of this Hellhole world. And this is another one where Jack kind of comes up with his own, during the sort of montage of taking out the underworld, he comes up with his own oath. So we have a different oath, too, like Mike had in his story. But let's see. Let me make sure this is safe for work real quick. But yeah, so Jack's oath is, you who are wicked, evil, and mean, I'm the nastiest creep you've ever seen. Come one, come all, put up a fight. I'll pound your butt with Green Lantern's light. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, just sort of a fun, sort of outlaw kind of Green Lantern story. And Jack Chance, he hasn't had a lot of appearances. He showed up during Emerald Twilight. He was one of the sort of gauntlet of Lanterns that Hal Jordan found himself up against. He killed as his sort of road to becoming Parallax. And then during John's run, when that was sort of retconned as to where a lot of those characters survived and were taken captive by the Manhunters, Jack was part of that. and kind of came back for a while, but I think he was killed shortly thereafter. He also had a later appearance, I think, in the last issue of the Green Lantern Corps Quarterly book, where I think Lobo comes to Hellhole in search of a bounty and sort of runs afoul of Jack. But yeah, not a lot of appearances of Jack Chance. He didn't get a cameo on the Green Lantern movie like Rottloff Fan did, later on, and he didn't get a figure. I did make a custom action figure of Jack Chance a while back too, so I'm gonna have to post that again. But yeah, just a fun, sort of out there story. They did a lot of this kind of stuff in the Green Lantern Corps Quarterly book. I feel like this is definitely one of the better, stories in that series. Just a quick kind of nitpicky thing I like to point out too about this character is on the last page you can clearly see like Jack is a humanoid, just sort of blue skin, but he only has 3 fingers on a thumb, and he has one nostril in his nose, like one large nostril in his nose. And it seems like Flint Henry was the only one to draw him like that. I don't know if it was a conscious choice for other artists or if they just weren't paying attention, but like everybody else always drew him with 4 fingers and a thumb and 2 nostrils. Again, it's a nitpicky thing. But, if you read the story, you see these things. So it's kind of surprising.
You said this is issue 1 of the quarterly?
Yeah, this is issue number 1. And he's on the cover. So, yeah, it's a fun story. Again, a character, I wish they would have done more with. I think he's definitely is kind of a nice counterpoint to sort of more straight, especially the older sort of straight-laced version of Hal Jordan, that we got for so long.
Yeah.
And just sort of some more sort of diversity within the Green Lantern Corps, and kind of different kind of stories you can tell. Yeah. So,
Are you ready for me then?
Yeah, Scott, do you want to talk about yours?
Yeah, well, I'm just going to say that I struggled to find a Green Lantern story. Green Lantern is one of those characters that I like. I think he's pretty cool. But then when I sat down to think about what is a really, really good Green Lantern story, I had a hard time. So I'm like, okay, I'll go through my collection.
If you look up top 10 Green Lantern stories online, you're going to find the same list basically on every site.
Yep. And it's like I don't have a whole lot of Green Lantern comics in what I consider my personal collection. I've got the book that I chose happens to be there, and then I've got and I haven't even read these. I've got the first Kyle Rayner issues of Green Lantern, and that's more just there in case that character becomes super popular and it's the value of those books skyrockets. One book that crossed my mind and I couldn't track it down, or I didn't track it down, I should say, was I knew that there was a story by Alan Moore about Mogo, the planet Green Lantern, and I thought that one would probably be a pretty good one to talk about. But I couldn't. I thought I had a trade of like all of Alan Moore's DC work, outside of Swamp Thing. I think that's where I read that story, and that was another Green Lantern annual, Tales of the Green Lantern Corps, like Mike's was.
Yeah.
Okay, well I thought it was from Green Lantern 188. Mogo Don't Socialize. So, cause I actually just did a search for it, and that's what it's telling me. But that's neither here nor there because that's not the story that I ended up choosing. So, but
that's possible. I have that, and you're right. That's the name of it. But I thought Dan was right that it was one of those short stories. But either way,
yeah. Green Lantern 188 is a John Stewart story.
Well, yeah, but it also has a backup story according to this.
Yeah, it's the second story in it. Arisa is reading the records of other Green Lanterns and learns of it. Yeah.
Okay, Dan's wrong.
And maybe it was reprinted because like whenever I read it the first time, it was in a compilation. It wasn't even in the original issue. But again, that's neither here nor there because that's not the story that I chose. And it's actually the story I chose is because one, it's in my collection, so I like this book enough to have it in my collection, and that was Green Lantern issue 76, and I guess I should say Green Lantern Green Arrow. Issue 76. No, even though that's on the cover, that's not the official title, right? It is just technically Green Lantern issue 76. And this is where Green Lantern starts to team up with Green Arrow. This is also the start of the Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams run on the book. It has a really, really iconic cover of Green Arrow shooting and destroying the Green Lantern as Hal is trying to, say the oath. On the cover, so there we go to the traditional oath, not as original or clever as the oath that you guys chose to to go over for your stories. But I think this book is important just because of the fact that it really kind of, a lot of people, it signals the beginning of the Copper Age. So where comics tend to try to become more socially relevant. And it's kind of, I don't know, looking back at it in hindsight, some of the social commentary that they're making is really kind of silly because, it boils down to an issue about race. And basically it's, Green Arrow and some citizens basically saying, well, what have you ever done, for Black Americans? And you can kind of say, in hindsight, well, gosh, how many times has he saved the planet? That's helping everybody. But again, it's just that whole move towards social conscience, in comics, and for better or worse, this was one of those books that kind of started that movement in comics. And I think probably the most important thing about it to me is the cover. That image most people recognize. If you show them if they think of Green Lantern, you show them a cover, then that's one that they're actually going to recognize, and they've seen either in a poster, on a reprint, someplace along there. But again, it started a really, really nice run on Green Lantern. I'm trying to think, they were together, maybe it's only like 10, 15 issues that those two were together.
Yeah,
well, they at that period there was only 10 or 15 issues, but then the whole title went on hiatus, and then it was resurrected a few years later, still with the banner of Green Lantern, Green Arrow, but it was when Mike Grell came back. Yeah. And that ran probably for another 20 issues with that banner on the front. Like you said, Scott, though, in the indicia, it's still Green Lantern.
Yeah.
It was just they threw the Green Arrow on there. I did want to say, though, that the panel that you were describing about, I've been, the black guy that's talking about what Green Lantern's done for the purple skins and the orange skins and stuff. What have you done for the black skins? That's probably one of the most iconic or most memorable panels or series of panels in comics. If you were to ask some people that are knowledgeable about comics and give me your top 10. So yeah, and it was, maybe it was in the early 70s. It was like Denny O'Neil was trying to do a wake up call, and in doing so, it was sort of almost like hitting people over the head a little bit too much, but it just wasn't very subtle, especially when you look at it with the goggles of 30, 40 years of hindsight.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's important just for the history of comics too, because even though it was kind of heavy-handed, it's still a step in the right direction. And again, for it's sophisticated for this type of stories you were getting back then.
Oh, for gosh, yeah.
Commentary goes. But yeah, we could definitely look back on it in hindsight and be like, oh, we've come way farther than this, of course. But yeah, for the time, I think it's still it was a pretty important piece of comics history there.
Yeah, and I think in this particular case, Green Lantern to me was almost the wrong character, and I guess I shouldn't use the term attack in this way, but him being globally minded,
right,
and really universe minded more so than locally, minded. It's kind of unfair, I guess, to put the character in that light. Maybe is kind of what I'm thinking, but. That team up of Green Lantern and Green Arrow, where all of a sudden Green Arrow's the conscience is not necessarily the best choice of words there. Did move us into that Copper Age, and again a little bit more serious take. So
now you'd say Copper Age. I call that the Bronze Age. Am I wrong? Copper being like after Crisis, or like later 80s.
I thought it was gold, silver, bronze, and then copper. And I've got my ages reversed.
No, you got it right. Gold, silver, bronze, but this would be bronze. This is like in 70 or late 60s, right?
Okay, well maybe I am cutting off the Silver Age at the wrong time. So you're probably right.
We get on that subject of ages, we'll be here all night again.
yeah, no kidding.
Get into all that again.
No, but it's something else I want to. Doggone it, what was I going to say about it? Anyway, yeah, it's a good choice though, because it's memorable, and it's and I think Denny O'Neil maybe in a way was trying to send this message to the editors like Carmine Infantino and some of the honchos at DC at the time, they were the ones that were reluctant to put any minority characters in the spotlight. I mean, you couldn't even get Tyrock in the Legion, to get a headline. It was pretty bad in those offices. So I have a feeling Denny being of that, he was pushing that toward them as much as anyone.
Now that we're talking about this, I realize one of the stories I was thinking about is sort of an interesting counterpoint to this. So when DC was doing the 100-page Giants that just sort of recently wrapped up, there's one called From Beyond the Unknown, and it's sort of a sci-fi themed issue. But there's an opening story with Green Lantern where he's taken captive by these aliens, and he's sort of put on trial for what he has neglected to do throughout the universe, saying that he focuses too much on Earth when he is supposed to be patrolling an entire sector of space. And so saying they're holding him responsible for all these tragedies that have occurred that he should have been there to stop, they think. But because he focuses all his attention on Earth, the rest of this, part of the universe is being left, neglected. And honestly, that's one of my problems with the character too, is that I think they should do a lot more with the Green Lanterns. But again, Earth has 4 or 5 Green Lanterns, more than that now.
Yeah.
So it's like, you only have 3,600. Why are so many in this one sector focused on this one planet?
Yeah, I mean, you imagine putting somebody like Brian K. Vaughan with that imagination and all. I mean, just looking at his work on Saga and stuff like that, just world building. You got to have a writer that's willing to just break the mold and just use their imagination. And it could be, like you said, as popular, as have as much potential as Star Wars.
Yeah.
Well, the problem with that, though, is that, readers tend to want to see Green Lantern team up with Green Arrow or Green Lantern team up with Wonder Woman. Right. And if he's out at the far edge of the universe, that's not going to happen.
Right.
Well, whereas I agree with you, Dan, that you can sometimes get some better stories. Like on the Marvel side, Dan Slott and Mike Allred's run on Silver Surfer was going on, and there was all this ridiculous stuff that was going on in the Marvel universe proper. But because he was out on the edge of the galaxy, it had very, very little impact on the storytelling there. And thus, we got some really, really good Silver Surfer stories that didn't have the weight and all the, I can't even come up with the word right now to describe it, the chaff, I guess, of what's going on in the regular part of the universe. So you can just focus in on that character.
Well, I will argue with that he is still from Earth, and he has a weapon on his hand that will teleport him there in an instant if he needs to be. I think you can still do that, but I think when you have all the stories centered on Earth, the cumulative effect looks bad.
Yeah.
For that character. Another thing I want to bring up real quick, and I'm pretty sure I've talked about this before on here, but we were just talking on the previous episode about the Who's Who omnibus coming out. Green Lantern fans should pick this up because also in the Who's Who entry for Green Lantern, they explain how the sectors are divided up. Oa is in the center of the universe. All the sectors branch out from Oa in 360 degrees of the universe. That's why there's 3,600 sectors. There are no gerrymandered sectors of outer space. They all have an even area to cover that all starts with Oa.
Gerrymandered.
Even though I love the book Far Sector. By the way, I'm reading Far Sector, not the Green Lantern, because Far Sector is way more what I'm looking for in a Green Lantern book. But the title doesn't make a lot of sense because every sector intersects at Oa. There should not be you could be further out in a sector, but there should be no concept of a sector that's farther away than anybody else's.
If you want to get really scientific, though, I don't know that pie-shaped diagram really even works.
Well, I would say it's more of a beach ball in three-dimensional space. I would say it's more of a beach ball in three-dimensional space with an imaginary line.
Yeah. But with every body in space constantly moving, the sector would have to move with those bodies because, otherwise you'd have different planets in your sector.
Unless Oa is the center of the universe and everything's expanding out from Oa at a consistent rate.
It is.
So there you go.
Oa is the center of the universe. according to the Guardians, anyway. But yeah, and again, I feel like this is something that they came up with probably back in the day when you had the sci-fi leaning writers under Julie Schwartz back in the day, just coming up with stuff. it was probably never expressed outside of that issue of Who's Who, but I can pretty much guarantee no one's read or wanting to acknowledge that since that came out in Who's Who back in the 80s.
What entry in Who's Who was that in?
I want to say it was either Green Lantern or the Green Lantern Corps, maybe.
Well, it's not there. Because I've got it in my hand right now.
I've tweeted it before. You have to. It's in the description. You have to read it. There's no
I thought you said it had a picture of it.
No. It just describes it.
Okay. I was looking for the image, not. For
yeah. No, I wish there was. I would love that. I'll just have to do that sometime.
Yeah, you're an artist. Just draw it.
I know, right? But it just, I don't know. I think it's such a good idea, and just I feel like it's such an elegant solution to the number of Green Lanterns and how it would all function, and just the idea of like, oh, it is in everyone's sector, sort of thing for the Green Lantern Corps. That it really bums me out that they never acknowledge that.
Okay, so here's the entry word for word. Each Corps member patrols a space sector encompassing 1/10 of a degree of an imaginary circle emanating from Oa, this legendary planet located in the very center of the universe.
Yeah.
So that is from what issue is this? Issue 9 of Who's Who.
Yeah.
And under the Green Lantern Corps is where that's
okay.
I happen to have that close by.
There you go. I do not, but
got the whole Who's Who stack right there.
You never know.
That's right.
You never know when you might need the 40-year-old out-of-date DC guide.
Actually, I just happened to know I got it in a drawer to sell, and I just haven't gotten around to post it, so I just happened to have seen it recently, so I knew it was there.
I will say a lot of Who's Who is still valid and is a good read, but yeah, it's just, becomes less valuable as time goes on, I suppose, as far as information goes.
Yeah, I always had a lot of people who were artists, like they would want to buy sets of those just use as reference before they had easy access to the internet and could just search and find something. So
yeah, good character guides in there, character models and stuff.
Well, we're ready to talk about what we've been reading.
So, anybody been reading anything good?
I know Mike said he's already got a write-up on something he's been reading. So,
okay. What have you been reading, Mike?
Let him go first again.
Well, yeah, I've got, a few things. I just want to mention, first of all, I completed my reread of the Steve Englehart, Marshall Rogers run on Detective Comics. I don't know exactly what issues it started with, maybe 468 through 480 something, but it features some not so memorable stories, like it's got a Penguin story in it, and it's got the first not modern age, of course, but Bronze Age period appearance of Deadshot with a pretty classic cover, and then of course it's got the Laughing Fish Joker story. It was a 2-issue arc. It's got Clayface and Hugo Strange stories, and all pretty good stuff. It's from its era, so take it for what it's worth. I am also doing my obligatory Marvel comic read of John Walker, U.S. Agent, just so Scott and I can stay friends. And no, I actually do like to pick up. I get Thor. I've been getting this. It's pretty good. I like Priest as a writer anyway, so I do need to have maybe a little bit of back history sometimes, I think, to get everything that's going on. So it's a good read. I recently reread.
Just real quick, did you like that first issue U.S. Agent then?
Yeah, I did.
Because I like the character and I was looking forward to that, but I just couldn't get into that issue.
Yeah, it wasn't like something I'm like, it's just, I just kind of chalked it up to my lack of understanding of what all is going on in his history. But I remember reading some stories of him in the 90s. But again, I wouldn't disparage it at all.
Right.
Scott, have you read it?
I have not gotten around to reading it yet. So
okay,
it's in my to read pile.
As part of my guided reading tour, whenever I listen to podcasts, I read comics along with it, so it kind of forces some structure on my otherwise tangled web of a brain. And it's the Justice League International Special featuring Mr. Miracle as 1990 World Tour. It's really more of a Mr. Miracle It should be a Mr. Miracle special because it's got very little to do with the Justice League in it, but still have the, features the writing talents of Given and DeMatteis, and I can't remember who the artist was. Oh, it's a guy named Phillips. I forget his Joe Phillips, maybe.
Yeah.
That'd be right. Yeah. And then lastly is, oh Lord, I tried to start writing how to describe multiversity. Now, multiversity was this was back in 2014 and 2015, and it'll take a better person than me or someone with a lot more time to adequately describe it. And even then, I don't know. I just point you toward the internet if you want a description of it. But I do like. I haven't reread it since it came out. I've been rereading all of the big events in DC history, and I pulled this up about 3 weeks ago, and I've been reading it off and on. It's got 2 bookend issues, and then 6 specials based on individual Earths in the New 52. And of course, this originally Morrison planned on this happening pre-New 52, but Dan DiDio shook things up and kind of, I don't know, just confused it even more. But it's the New 52, 52 Earths in the multiverse. It included in these specials an issue called the Society of Superheroes, which was Earth 16, the Just, which was Earth 20, and the Just were like the children of the generation before Justice League, and they did so well at protecting the Earth. They really didn't need superheroes, but these kids dressed up like their parents and their mentors, and they basically just hang out. It's sort of like just think of Malibu or California kids, all rich kids, and they're just really just playing the role without having to actually fight crime. But it's really cool as far as artwork, the story and the art. Pax Americana is based on Earth 4, and that is the Charlton characters. The art was by Frank Quitely. I tell you, I've read this 3 or 4 times, and I still don't quite get it. I know if I were to look it up and probably get the gist of it, it would be explained. I think there was something to do with some, Pulp Fiction type jumping around in the timeline. It wasn't linear or something. So then there was an issue called Thunderworld, which was Earth 5, the Shazam characters. That was really good. Masterman was the Earth X/Earth 10, where the Nazis won World War II. And then Ultra Comics which is Earth 0. And then there was a guidebook. And so again, it was good writing, but it's pretty elusive, this Morrison stuff. But the art, you can't beat it. You're talking about Ivan Reyes, Frank Quitely, Cameron Stewart, Chris Sprouse, Carl Story, Ben Oliver, and Doug Monkey. So basically, the essence of the story is that there's these flying eyeballs called the Gentry, and they're attacking the multiverse. And Nix Uton, I guess that's how you pronounce it, he's the last of the monitors, and he's also got this weird name called the Super Judge. And again, it's some of, I don't know, I'd say chemically induced ideas from Morrison. He finds Earth 7, which Earth 7, there's like 2 different Earths in the multiverse that are like Marvel character analogs, which I found interesting. But Earth 7 was completely destroyed except for Thunder, which was the Thor. He was like an Australian Aboriginal that was the superhero, and he was the Thor analog. Really cool character. And I can't believe I'm talking about Tyrock twice in one episode, but he had this like onesie type, outfit that looked like Tyrock's. But anyway, the Gentry turn this monitor evil, and he alerts the rest of the universes. They all get together, helped by the Harbinger from the original Crisis. And again, I could, no matter how hard I try, we're either going to be here too long, or it's just going to be like, this is making no sense, you trying to describe it. So let's just stop right now, Mike. But all I'll say is that Morrison's ideas are cool, but it's like strands of spaghetti. You get a handful, and it just slips out of your hands. It just doesn't stick in my mind. And I feel almost inadequate as a comic reader, or like I'm missing out on some huge inside joke, like everybody else understands it. But anyway, it would have been, the ideas, I think, would have been great for launching other series. And you can kind of tell that's what they were meant to do, but they never did anything with them. And like I said, it was a struggle, but then again, you think, man, maybe somebody at some point will pick up some of these ideas and make better stories out of it. So anyway, that's what I've been reading for the last couple of months.
Go ahead, Dan.
What's that?
So go ahead, Dan.
Well, I've been reading a lot of Vigilante and Batman: The Adventures Continue.
You and me both.
In addition to that, let's see. So I read a lot of stuff. So I guess on the Marvel side, I think I've talked about this before in the previous episodes, but Marvel's doing a lot of good villain books right now. The Doctor Doom ongoing's been really solid. Black Cat was really good, and they just brought that back this past week as we're recording. There's a Juggernaut miniseries right now that's pretty good. There's a Taskmaster book they're doing, sort of supposed to be a Black Widow tie-in, which really isn't working out that way now because the movie's been pushed back till next May. As we're recording this, who knows what it'll actually be? I feel like I'm forgetting one too. I think there's something else too. But a lot of good villain stuff from Marvel right now, which is good because it's hard to do a good villain book, in the superhero universe. So they're all kind of, and they're different kind of voices with the stories too. It's not, the same thing in every book. Marvel's also doing the Wolverine Black, White, and Blood miniseries right now. Again, sort of in the style of the old Batman Black and White, but just one color sort of anthology Wolverine stories, which have been pretty good so far. And on DC, they have just started up a new Batman Black and White miniseries. Again, I think so far just the first issues out of that, but it's been, first issue is really good. The previous miniseries they've done of that are really solid too. If you can find those, pick them up. Just, creators coming in, doing a short story and kind of moving on, but they're all usually pretty good, typically character-centric stories. Again, I'm always reading Batman and the Detective. The Joker War, kind of wrapped up a little bit ago. That was really solid. James Tynion's still on Batman. Trying to think what else. Been reading The Orville from Dark Horse. If you're a fan of the show, it was supposed to be back right around now for the third season. I don't know what's going on with that necessarily, but it'll still be a while before we get that. So if you've got, want to get your Orville fixed, comics are kind of the only way to do it right now. And it is written by some of the creators of the show. So they've been really solid. They do read like episodes of the show, which you can't say for a lot of licensed books. But yeah, they've been pretty solid. Back to DC, they're doing more of the Tales of the Dark Multiverse specials. They did a series of those a while back that were really good. I'm liking these new ones where they're just taking sort of key event stories from DC and kind of doing a dark twist on them, where sort of everything goes wrong, with the sort of a dark what if for DC. Yeah, just so much stuff. Batman's Grave just wrapped up that series. That sort of 12-issue run's been really good. Back to Marvel. Dan Slott's run on Fantastic Four still really solid. Like with their 27 issues in now, still really good. They're doing some fun stuff, and you just really get the impression Dan Slott's had these ideas kicking around for quite a while. Like right off the bat, Ben and Alicia got married, and it just feels like that's something he's wanted to do for years. You know what I mean? I feel like he's got a lot of good ideas, and now he's getting to do them all. Always reading Savage Dragon. That book's gotten pretty crazy the last few years. But again, like the only Image book still being done consistently by the creator of the book for, coming up on 30 years soon. So
250, how many issues? What's he on now?
254, I think. 255.
I'm not really necessarily plugging another podcast, but I listened to a really cool 2-part interview with Eric Larson on a podcast called like Comic Book Historians. Mm-hmm. It's pretty straightforward. They do a lot of interviews with creators, especially older creators, and pretty interesting if you take the time to look it up on the feed.
I know we haven't talked about the book since it came out, but the first issue of Batman Catwoman's out now, finally, like a year later than it was supposed to be. Again, sort of like Multiversity, how much will it matter now that it's finally come out? So, and again, it's Black Label, so it's not in the monthly Batman books. It's questionable about, how is this tied to continuity? Will this have repercussions, or are they just letting Tom King go his own thing here for this last little run? I mean, I'm sure when they collect Tom King's stuff, this will probably be in there, so, but we'll see. And again, it's solid, but again, the first issue, just a lot of setup. So if you follow Marvel on social media, you'll probably have seen the Marvel Heroes at Home they were doing during the quarantine, and so they've collected those into this little one-shot book, and they're fun. Just sort of, I mean, it's a small format book, like each page is a panel, but they're just sort of fun stories of like the heroes home, under quarantine, and like Captain America not wanting to do his dishes, so he eats his spaghetti out of his shield, and like Thor trying to cut his hair at home and screwing up, so he's wearing his helmet now. And there's a good one with Eddie Brock. Leaves the house, forgets his mask, so he uses the symbiote to make a mask for him. But then later on, he's at home and he's out of toilet paper, and then you see the symbiote jumping out the window. So just a fun, just a silly book. I will say though, it's $10, which is for no bigger than the book is. I think that's too steep, but it's a fun book, and it's got. I'm not sure, but it's written by Zeb Wells, but it's drawn by Yuri Hiru, and again, I never know if I'm pronouncing that right, but I like their art. A lot of DC, a lot of Batman stuff, as per usual for me. Again, I mentioned earlier, Far Sector, I think is a really good Green Lantern book being done right now, kind of more what I want to read with a Green Lantern story.
I agree with you there.
Yeah, and again, I just, feel like DC's just sort of treading water a little bit right now because we just know Future State's around the corner, and what's the status of these books going to be post Future State, and we're starting to get some of that now, but we'll be talking about that, I'm sure, in the next previews episode.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I think that's about it. Yeah, I got tons of long boxes staring me in the face here, that stuff I need to read. So there's always that. The never-ending pile. What about you, Scott? What have you been reading lately?
All right. Well, I think I mentioned that in November I was going to reread V for Vendetta for Guy Fawkes Day. So I did do that. I think I maybe even mentioned that on a previous podcast. I also reread Arkham Asylum. Just because, So that was kind of, and sadly I've been doing a lot of rereading of things here lately. And I'll get to my big reread here in just a second. I did, however, read the first trade of Once and Future, and I actually really, really enjoyed that. So I'm definitely I'm looking forward to the second trade of that. I even went back and picked up a graded copy of issue 1 of that just because I thought it was really, really solid. And the grandmother is my favorite character in that book. There's a Comixology exclusive by Jeremy Hahn called 40 Seconds. The first 3 issues of that are out. I've read the first 2, and it's a real solid science fiction story. Again, I haven't read the 3rd issue yet. It just came out fairly recently, but the first 2 are really, really good. So I've read those. What else? Of course, Vigilante and and Batman the Adventure Continues, which you're probably sick of hearing us talk about those books. One book that was kind of a surprise for me, I didn't know what I was going to expect out of that, was Shang-Chi. So I read the first issue of Shang-Chi, and that book, I feel like that's going to be a pretty solid, it's going to be a 5-issue series. I've read the first issue, so that's been good. The main thing that I have been reading here lately is, for whatever reason, I decided to go back and start reading Captain America starting in issue 100. And I don't know why I chose issue 100. I probably should have went back to Tales of Suspense and started reading, where those stories started. But for whatever reason, I started reading the Captain America 100. I'm up to about 185 or 86 now. And that has been, those stories are not how I remember them for the most part. I guess the big thing is that probably for the first 30, 40 issues of Cap, It is a romance book. It is basically what is going on between Captain America and Sharon Carter and all the things that get in the way of their relationship and how they're both pining over each other. And occasionally there'll be some fights. um, and then, of course, it takes a pretty big turn where we get into the Steve Englehart run, where that's where we get into Secret Empire and Richard Nixon was the head of the Secret Empire and kills himself in the Oval Office and of course out of that comes Nomad, where Cap or Steve Rogers leaves the uniform behind. So I've been that's been taking up most of my reading time is that reread through Captain America. I don't know how far I'm going to go into that, but who knows? I'll probably at least go to issue 300 and then we'll see what happens there. So, and speaking of Captain America, probably should mention that as we record this on December 20th, this is the actual 80th anniversary of the first issue of Captain America Comics #1. So I'm sure that we will be coming up with Captain America stories here in the near future. And I should not have the trouble finding a good Captain America story like I did Green Lantern story.
Good stuff.
Yeah. But yeah, I've got Taskmaster I want to read, U.S. Agent I want to read, Batman, Catwoman I want to read, Strange Adventures I haven't even started yet, Rorschach, all those are books that are in that to-read pile that I need to get to. And just
I'm kind of looking forward to this, a little bit of a break so I can read current stuff. There's so little current stuff that I have been reading that I need to get caught up. I'm not in the Dan Brown state of things, but I'm still pretty far behind.
Well, I'm not saying this to brag, but maybe just so you'll feel better. I'm looking right now. I'm counting. I've got 12 long boxes over here of back issues to read that I haven't gotten to yet. So that's right. So don't feel bad about where you're at. Yeah, it's ridiculous. And that's without 8 tons this year too. So some of the stuff's been sitting for a while over here.
Well, if you wouldn't have spent so much time on Inktober, then
that's true. Yeah, I always get behind with Inktober, that's for sure. Working full time and drawing at night, that'll do it. I get behind on everything though with that.
So are all those long boxes, Dan, are they're new comics that you had bought that you haven't read yet?
No, these are back issues. The new stuff is only like one short box I'm behind on.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you put it that way. There was a long period of time when I buy back issues and not read them.
Yeah, it's like when you go to BirdCon and they say 5 free comics and you take like 25. Stuff like that. And it's also like when you're unemployed during a quarantine, but the government's sending you a lot of money and you're like, oh, I can order some stuff online while I'm chilling out at home. Some of that too.
I get it.
So, been some of that this year, filling in some key issue holes in the collection and stuff like that. But yeah. So some stuff I have read though, or some Christmas stories.
Yeah, there you go.
What you guys?
Well, I've just read one, so.
Yeah.
It's kind of ironic. I was already reading the book where this story came from that I'm going to talk about whenever we decided let's pick out a Christmas story, because I like to try to find one holiday special during this time of year. So it worked out.
Well, what have you been reading, Mike?
Well, the comic I have is, thanks for the segue, Dan.
You're welcome.
Christmas with the Superheroes #2 from 1989. So this, it's got a cover by Steven DeStefano. He's mostly known for his creation of Amazing Man in the mid '80s. Yeah, and he's got a bunch of DC's primary characters hanging out with Santa and the elves in a workshop, and these specials have come in lots of forms over the years, digest and treasure editions and square bounds like this one. But this issue's the home of 6 holiday solo stories featuring Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Enemy Ace, which is all silent, by the way, Flash and Green Lantern, which is untitled, and the one I'm covering featuring Deadman and a story called should old acquaintance be forgot. So this was the last story in the comic, like I said, and I was really pleasantly surprised to find it the best of the stories by far. Deadman's never really been my favorite character. It's not that I dislike it, like him or the stories, but it takes just the right kind of story for him to fit into, and a good writer to make him work. And I think that's what Alan Brenner did in this little short story. And plus, it didn't hurt to have it really well drawn by Dick Giordano. So Deadman exists on the spectral plane, usually his stories. Because of that, his stories largely play out in his mind, in his inner monologue, because there's really no one to communicate with unless he inhabits a person's body, or he's talking to somebody like the Spectre or some other ghost. So the story starts off with Deadman trying to right the scales of justice by taking the body of some junk bond broker and who had just bought out a big supermarket chain and broke it up into smaller pieces, sold it off, and it cost 50,000 people their jobs. So Deadman, while occupying this guy's body, and you got to remember his sense of ethics is what you might call squishy. He basically, while in this guy's body, called the home office and said, "You give all these $50,000 or 50,000 people 6 weeks severance pay." That's pretty cool that he did that. Anyway, it goes on with Deadman sort of lamenting that there's not enough to do this time of year because there's a lot of goodwill going on, and that just adds to his loneliness. As he's kind of floating through the city park, he gives in to temptation and jumps into the body of a young woman that's ice skating. And he's thinking about how it's great to feel the wind in his face and the cold air and just being what it feels like to be alive again. And it makes you think about, wow, really, in his case, has no senses at all. He doesn't have any, being a ghost. So then he hops into the body of a guy named Paul, who's also skating with his girlfriend. And Paul, Paul's holding the hand of his girlfriend while they skate, and he gives her a kiss, and all this is going on in Boston Brand's mind. And at the same time, you're thinking, man, this, not everybody would think that this is really cool. He's kind of doing things that wouldn't be that no one's consenting to. But either way, he stays in this guy Paul's body as they go to a holiday party. And he's talking about how he gets caught up in this guy's life. He's welcomed like he's old friends with them, and he kind of lets himself believe that. Again, he kisses his girlfriend under the mistletoe, and completely immerses himself into the guy's experiences. He exchanged gifts, enjoying Christmas dinner before the reality kind of washes back over him that this isn't his Christmas, it's Paul's, and he realized he's been kind of selfish in stealing the experience from Paul, because whenever Deadman leaves his body, Paul won't remember any of this. He'd be like, what the hell happened to me? Last thing I remember, I was back in the park. And so Deadman guiltily kind of rushes off out of the body, doesn't want to witness the confusion. And then he goes into kind of like a self-pity, kind of sulking around, and did one of these things that you always see in a Deadman story. He lashes out at Ramakrishna for damning him to this condition. And anyway, he's kind of approached by this beautiful blonde woman who can see and communicate with him. And Deadman's intrigued. He can't figure out who she is. And he even asks her if she's one of like Madame Xanadu's mystic friends. And as they stroll around together, she kind of subtly and eloquently reminds him of the good that he really does for people. And he does do a lot. He doesn't have to be recognized for it to be worthwhile. She does all this to kind of, get him out of his little pity party mood. And she kept saying, we don't do it for the glory or the recognition, she would say. We do it because if we don't, no one will do it. And anyway, at this point, I'm like, okay, who's this person supposed to be? And she reminds him that he's only human, even in a ghost form, and because of that, he should rejoice in it. It's what makes him feel alive. And as she tells him Merry Christmas and walks away, he says, hey, what's your name? And she says, Kara. And he says, but I doubt that it would mean anything to you. And it doesn't, because as you know, Kara Zor-El, Supergirl, in post-crisis, she was wiped from everybody's minds. So people, even though she died, no one, to add insult to injury, no one even remembered her. except for whatever, maybe Superboy Prime or certain people, but for the most part, no one did. And anyway, for this was like 3 years after Crisis, I guess, this story, and it was still fresh enough in the minds of DC fans, I think, for it to resonate. And it actually gave me a chill whenever she revealed who she was, because I didn't even suspect it was her. And so it was a really good story, and it was like 10 pages long. It just, I read a lot of Christmas stories, like I said, in the last week or two, and this one was by far the best. So I recommend it to you.
Dan, you up? You'll have to unmute, though, if you want to talk.
Yeah, I don't care. I do what I want.
That's how you roll.
Kind of pick it up from just something I wanted to bring up, too, after Mike talking about his story, is I know there was an issue of the Brave and the Bold series from about 10 years ago that Mark Waid and like later Straczynski came in and wrote, where Deadman gets called out for sort of his conduct and how he operates, and just sort of like taking people's bodies and taking off without leaving a note for people or anything like that. I want to say it might have been Black Canary telling him off. I can't remember exactly now, but I'm pretty sure it was a Green Arrow story with Deadman. But yeah, it's you don't think about it as you're reading the stories, but looking back, it's like, oh yeah, like he just takes people's bodies and runs off, even if they're a superhero or whatever. Yeah, and people wouldn't know what's going on.
I mean, you imagine it's not just the criminals that he takes over their bodies; it's just citizens, people walking around and he uses them to fight the bad guys. So they're like, wow, I haven't used those muscles in a while. Why am I sore?
Yeah. But again, mine is also a ghost story to talk about. Mine is Marley's Ghost, and this was an adaptation of A Christmas Carol that Harvey Kurtzman tried to do back in the 50s. So this was something that Comixology picked up a few years ago and actually sort of made, kind of using notes and an outline from Harvey Kurtzman. I don't really want to talk about the story that much because it's Charles Dickens' A Christmas Story. It's literally what it is. It's an adaptation of that. I think anybody listening to this has probably heard the story of Ebenezer Scrooge being a jerk to everybody, being visited by ghosts through the night, and kind of shown the consequences of his actions, and sort of redeeming himself there at the end. But apparently this was something that Harvey Kurtzman tried to get off the ground years ago. And basically what he's describing is what we would call a graphic novel today. And it was something he took around to book publishers and wanted to do a coffee table book of this comic book adaptation. And of course, nobody took him seriously back then. There wasn't any kind of precedent for something on that scale. I mean, we're not just talking about like a one-shot comic book, and something definitely, more substantial than like you would get with the sort of Classics Illustrateds, back then, that kind of thing. But yeah, like Simon and Schuster apparently wouldn't even take a meeting with him and things like that. But he had a lot of notes, and apparently, and there is some back matter in this book too that kind of shows some of the development. But he was, the idea was that Jack Davis was going to draw it with him. And so there is like a finished page of Jack Davis work they show at the end. But Comixology picked this up a few years ago. And so it's, the script is credited to Josh O'Deal and Shannon Wheeler from Too Much Coffee Man and now the Mueller Report adaptation he did. And it's illustrated by Gideon Kendall, who I'm not familiar with, but he definitely is sort of channeling Jack Davis throughout this. Again, I'm not saying he's straight up aping his style or anything, but it definitely has a Jack Davis tone to it. And obviously that was probably intentional because that was how the book was originally supposed to be. But it is just sort of a fun comic adaptation of A Christmas Carol. And then at the end, there's a little bit of history of the making of it, what, Kurtzman's plans were. There's a lot of sort of thumbnails and layouts by Kurtzman, which the artist used to make this, book. Really, the only downside for me is that this is just a digital book. It's exclusive to Comixology. If you have Comixology Unlimited, you can read it. It's on there. It's part of that service. But it is a Christmas story, and it's like, this is something I would really like to have a nice hardcover, how Kurtzman intended it to be, that I would like to break out at Christmas and sit down and read. I can still read it on Comixology, but again, as we all know, it's not the same as reading a physical book, especially around the holidays. This would be a nice thing to have. But I could read it like this. It's kind of the only option right now. But again, and I know Comixology wants it. It is a Comixology original. I'm sure they see the importance of it for their service. But man, print a physical copy. Give me an overpriced hardcover. I'll buy it of this. It's a good story. It's a Christmas Carol. And it is a very good adaptation of it. It's set in the original time and everything. It's not Scrooged, even though I like that movie, that's not what this is. It isn't the original Victorian setting, Tiny Tim and all that, and the ghosts. But yeah, I really like this book. I've read it a couple times. But yeah, and again, it is sort of an interesting footnote to Harvey Kurtzman's career. Again, he was already kind of riding high with Mad at that point. It's just.
When did this come out, Dan?
It was published by Comixology, I think, in 2017. So, but again, he was trying to get this off the ground in like 1954, 1956, something like that. And again, nobody was even thinking about graphic novel back then. You know what I mean? So it really was sort of ahead of its time for how he wanted to publish it. But, it'd be decades. And apparently he tried getting it going in the 60s too and couldn't get anyone to take him up on it, which is too bad. But
I'll definitely check it out since it's on Unlimited.
Yeah. If you have Comixology Unlimited, definitely check it out. It's a good read. And just sort of the historical aspect of it, and the sort of you have a lot of sketches by Kurtzman here for the layout and stuff like that. And then there's sort of finished page by Jack Davis, which is neat seeing. Just sort of lost work by these guys. But yeah, just a good good Christmas story, a fun version of that. Story that we've all heard, through different forms over the years, things like that. But yeah, Comixology, give me a physical copy. I would love to have this on the bookshelf, not just on the tablet. So, got what you've been reading.
Well, I got the book I chose for a Christmas story was Uncanny X-Men 143. Which is probably the equivalent of Die Hard as a Christmas movie, for one of those arguments. But it basically is what if John Byrne and Chris Claremont apparently wanted to do an Alien story, because this came out about probably 18 months after the movie Alien was in the theaters. And it kind of starts off with a flashback scene to Storm fighting these, basically these demons. And apparently this occurred around X-Men like issue 96. There's a little footnote, it says for details, see X-Men 96. But they basically think that they've destroyed all these demons by destroying this particular artifact. And however many years later here in X-Men 143, apparently one of these demons returns. And it's a very xenomorph looking alien. So we have Kitty Pryde and the X-Men are kind of all at home. It is interesting that since we talked about the Wolverine 4-issue series, that Mariko Yoshida makes an appearance in this this issue with Wolverine. But ultimately, all of the rest of the X-Men have to leave the mansion. So Kitty Pryde is there by herself, and she decides, well, she'll just jump down to the danger room and train, because she's got nothing else to do. Plus being Jewish, she's a Hanukkah person. This is all taking place on Christmas Eve. So while she's in the danger room, this intruder alert goes on, and something's broken into the mansion, and she gets confronted by this this very alien looking creature. I think they're the Cairn, Cairn. I can't remember the exact name. So she basically spends most of the issue trying to escape from this creature that's basically chasing her through the mansion, and she finally makes it down to the hangar where the Lockheed is stored, not her dragon friend, but the actual was it XR-51 or whatever it is, the ship that the X-Men use to travel around, and is able to get the alien into the jets of the Lockheed and basically disintegrates it. So anyway, again, it's a Christmas story in the sense that it takes place on Christmas Eve, and it talks about Christmas. Then at the end, X-Men return. They actually show up with Kitty's parents, and of course, it's kind of crazy. They should, kind of see the evidence that something's wrong from the outside, and other than the lights being out, they really don't say a whole lot about it. But Storm comes down later because this alien actually came in through Storm's room, and Storm goes to her room, comes back, says, "Why is my room trashed?" And because Kitty hasn't said anything about what happened yet, so. But anyway, so again, it's kind of one of those stories where it just takes place on Christmas Eve. Clearly, Byrne and Claremont were influenced by the movie Alien for this story. But it's a nice one and it's fairly early. Kitty Pryde's only been around since issue 129 at this point, so she's only been in 14, 15 months of a comic, so she's still a new character, and I guess it really gave readers a chance to get to know this fairly new character a little bit better and a little bit more about the character. So
sorry, Scott, I was going to ask you, how long was she known as Sprite as her code name?
Oh, I guess she went through several code names. Of course, she started as Kitty Pryde and Sprite, and then she later became Shadowcat. That was in the Kitty Pryde and Wolverine series. Yeah. And gosh, there are some there are some other names that she's had, and of course she's been Kitty and Kate and Catherine, depending upon which part of the run. But she's gone by multiple different identities.
This is like her first. Sprite was her first one, though, wasn't it? Or no?
I think so. I think she was originally Sprite. I had to double check in 129. But I did notice in the letter pages, and since you guys now have been paying a little more attention to letter pages as I flip through books, there is a letter in this one, and the letter column is called X-Mail, from Kurt Busiek. And yeah, and he is explaining to him why he is no longer reading X-Men. Because apparently, they're treating the X-Men too harshly. So, he's like, here he's saying, I love the X-Men. If you treated them as they deserve, I would still be a faithful supporter. But until matters changes, you've lost yourself a reader. Yeah. So apparently he wasn't particularly happy with, because this is, Dark Phoenix had occurred, so, and then there was, something else. Of course, the whole thing with the Hellfire Club is he pointed out the Hellfire Club and the Dark Phoenix stories as them just beating up on the X-Men. And this is, so apparently he was from Lexington. MA, is that Maryland? No, MD's Maryland, Maine, Lexington, Maine. Yeah. So I wonder if he still lives here, 41 Somerset Road.
Look him up.
That's right. So send a letter there and see what happens. So
don't try to contact Kurt Busiek, people.
No, seriously, no.
We're not advocating that.
No.
But just in case you do, Dan Brown is the one that said that, yes.
Yeah. What I think is interesting, and we were kind of talking about this at the store yesterday, was now that Marvel has publishing rights to the Aliens franchise, they could go back and redo this issue like they did Giant Size X-Men #1 with like new artists drawing pages and stuff, and you could just slot a Xenomorph in there.
Yep.
With this story.
Yeah.
I mean, and they even changed the look of the demon because it did not have it wasn't as alien looking in the issue 96 even in the flashback scene at the start of this issue. It did not have the same appearance.
Right.
So it was seemed to be very, very deliberate. So.
Right.
But when we said Christmas Story, this is the first one that popped in my mind, so that's what I went with.
I think I read this years ago as an issue of X-Men Classic back in the day. I think when you could find those at toy stores and everywhere years ago, back when the cartoon was on, back in the 90s. Well, anything else I want to bring up, or?
I think that's got it.
That wraps it up for me.
All right. So thanks for listening to all our shenanigans. We'll be back soon with a new episode. But right now, where can everybody find you, Scott?
At burgcomics.com, burgcomics.com, and of course on Facebook and Instagram and all those fun places.
And Mike, where can people find you if they want to get in touch?
It's a big if, but at Mike Atchison5 on Twitter.
And I'm Dan Brown. You can find me online at Detective651 on Twitter and Instagram, and on my TeePublic store. Still got a bunch of stuff on there for sale. And you can find me just about every Saturday at Campus Comics, located at 816 East Main Street, Suite B in Carbondale. But the store is open from Tuesday through Saturday, 11 to 5. And again, you can find us on Facebook and Twitter, or if you want to call the store, the number is 618-457-6011. And we'll be back soon. Bye.
All right, so this is going to be our bonus content because we forgot to talk about it. So I'll just insert the theme song here, and then we'll just go straight into this. We should talk about HBO Max. We forgot to talk about that, especially since as much as you guys have talked about the fact that it's not on Roku. So Dan,
I've talked about it. I think Mike.
This will be for our Patreon listeners.
Yeah.
Patreon exclusive hot takes. I think Mike was kind of getting sick of me complaining about it at the store every Saturday, and I didn't realize I was doing that. But I think the interesting thing is too, HBO Max has gone up on Roku, and DC Universe has gone down. So DC Universe app is no longer available on Roku because they are getting rid of all the video content. So there's no point in having it on a TV. I will say again, we were talking before the episode about full page versus panel when reading digital. But what you could do on the TV is the TV mode that the DC Universe app had, where you could read your comics on the TV. I never really got into that. I tried it a few times just for the novelty, but I just couldn't get into it. But again, that's something that's just gone now from the app. I think I can still watch stuff on my iPad right now, because like the movie and TV content is still there. I don't think I can bring it up on my phone though. I think I had some error the other day because I was just kind of checking everything when I saw it was taken down from Roku. And they did say they were going to do this. Like there was an email or something I got that said that they were going to. I think eventually the entire app comes down, and then they relaunch the DC Universe Infinite app. I think is how it's going to happen in January.
Okay.
But even though they just renewed my subscription, by the way. But yeah, so they still have the movies and TV stuff on here. Let me just see if I can break something up real quick. I'll turn down the audio here.
Well, I'm going to break down and get the DC Universe Infinite, I guess. So when that change becomes official, I think I'll just go ahead and subscribe. I figure I'm already subscribing to Comixology and Marvel Unlimited. I might as well just add the third one.
So I can still watch stuff on my iPhone. So I guess it's just maybe the Roku or the TV apps they took down. But I'm sure there's going to be stuff that's on there that's not going to migrate to HBO Max.
Yeah.
I can't imagine. There's going to be some weird things that. But having said that, they've got the Steel and Catwoman movies on HBO Max, so who knows? I guess if you're playing along at home, there's also the free Tubi app, Tubi, and they've got a lot of DC content on there now too. They've got a lot of old DC cartoons and stuff on there. I know they have the what was it called? So there was a toy line Mattel was doing a couple years ago that was just called Batman, but it became Batman Unlimited, and there were some straight to DVD cartoons of that. There were also some shorts they made for online, I think, and it looks like those are all on there, so you can watch all those. They're just these kind of quick action-packed shorts. Again, I don't think there's anything. I haven't watched them all. I don't know if there's anything amazing on there, but it's Batman stuff I haven't seen. And that's on there. And then I think they have the 60s Batman cartoon is on there too to watch, which that's good. It's sort of if you're a big fan of the Adam West show, I would definitely recommend checking out that cartoon too. It's definitely in the style of that. Again, it's not like villains from the show and that kind of stuff, but it is sort of a nice companion piece to the old 60s show. Not to be confused with the, I want to say it's called the New Batman Adventures or New Adventures of Batman from the 70s that had the Green Bat-Mite character in there, which is, I think that's Adam West doing Batman in that too, but that show is just awful. The 60s cartoon is worth checking out. So there's some of that stuff on there. And again, that's just a free app you can get and watch stuff on. But I think, it shows too that not everything is on HBO Max, like I think people were probably assuming. Again, it looks like the DCU originals are on there. But, I don't know. I don't think, we all kind of thought DC Universe was going to be your one stop for DC content. And it never really played out that way as far as the media content and stuff other than the comics. And now it will just be comics and the sort of community section they have on there.
Well, maybe once all the licenses for other things expires, then all that stuff will migrate over to HBO Max.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I would imagine it will, because I know, I'm sure the CW stuff is on Netflix for a few more years at least. Yeah. Whenever those contracts run out, like Batwoman is on there now. Batwoman never went to Netflix. So it's on HBO Max, so that probably will be the case. Again, I always thought that stuff will go to the DC Universe app. Never happened. But yeah.
Did you say that Tubi was free or just free for a limited time?
No, it's free. You
have to watch commercials.
Yeah. But I've never paid for anything on there.
Uh-uh.
And they have other stuff on there too, of course. It's not just DC, but it's kind of what I was checking out on there. You know what they do have too is the Image Revolution documentary about the creation of Image Comics back in the day. That is worth watching. Mm-hmm. And then the Doomed documentary about the Roger Corman Fantastic Four movie. Mm-hmm. So that's worth watching too. That's on there. I think both those were on Amazon too at one point. I don't know if
they were. I know the Doomed was on Amazon Prime at one point.
So. Yeah. But those are both on there. And they've got the 80s. The Ruby Spears Superman cartoon from the 80s is on there too. That's worth checking out. And they've got a bunch of the DC Nation shorts too that were on Cartoon Network years ago that were on the DC Universe app.
Do they have the Animal Man ones?
Probably. I bet they've got
them on here. Animal Man.
Yeah, and the Plastic Man ones were really good with Tom Kenny because he was supposed to play Plastic Man on that cartoon that never took off. So yeah, there's definitely some comic stuff to check out on there.
That was the best. The Animal Man where Darkseid is invading New York. Oh my gosh, that one was hilarious.
there's some good stuff in there. Those shorts, they got the Aardman sort of claymation shorts they did and everything. There's some good stuff in there. But yeah, so again, so I didn't hear the announcement for HBO Max. I just woke up early one day. I'm like, let's see what the news is, see if there's any movement on that. And it was like launching today. So I'm like, all right. So I re-downloaded. I think it still had just a regular HBO icon when I found it again, but it said HBO Max when you opened it up. So I downloaded it then. And again, it's the most expensive subscription service I subscribe to, as far as a monthly basis. And it's just like, it was the hardest to use. And, and it doesn't have, the breadth of, a library that, like Netflix does or some of the others. But again, there's good stuff on there. They got a lot of TCM stuff on there. Again, there's the DC and then there's the Looney Tunes and Adult Swim hubs and that kind of thing to check out. And of course, everything that's on HBO. But yeah, it was just a pain to use. And, I don't know if we talked about it on here or we were just talking, but I was previously watching it through my PS4, and when I'd watch an episode of a show, it would just keep loading and never start the next episode. I had to restart the app. That's a no-brainer. If you want me binge watching, I got to be able to binge watch. I can't binge watch if I can't watch the next one.
Yeah, if I have to stop to do something to keep watching, I'm probably just going to stop watching.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I would do. I'm like, all right, what else? Because I don't want to keep messing with this. It's 2020. I shouldn't have to. But again, so it looks like somebody finally blinked before Wonder Woman comes out on Christmas Day. Again, HBO Max wasn't the successful launch that they wanted. I'm sure they're still making money, but again, not what they wanted to do.
They're not up there
especially
with Disney and there's 70 million something subscribers.
yeah, and it's just like, especially during quarantine too. Like they should have really had higher numbers than they did on there. But and now, with their controversial push of all Warner Brothers movies will be released same day to HBO Max next year, and who knows how that'll shake out.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it definitely seems like HBO is asking for forgiveness instead of permission there. So we'll see what happens. But again, just with the theater situation being what it is right now, will we be able to see these in theaters next year? We assume we will, but we assume we would be by now too.
Yep.
We didn't think this would still be going on at the end of the year, but here we are. So yeah, we'll see how that kind of plays out. You guys have any thoughts on that, or like, gonna get HBO Max now, or what are your guys' thoughts on all this? I feel like I'm talking a lot here.
Well, no, I posed the question to you because I knew that you knew the most about it. So
yeah,
I was expecting you to do all the talking.
Right.
Well, my wife and I and my youngest daughter are going to see Wonder Woman 84 on Christmas Day. I don't think, I don't know. I'd have to look at some of the library. I see what you said, it's $15 a month. Didn't you say that before?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if that seems like a pretty hefty price. I'd have to look at the content and whether we would take full advantage of it, because it seems like there's so much out there anyway. It just have to be stuff I want to see. And I'm just not, I don't sit still long enough a lot of times to watch a whole lot of TV. So.
Yeah, Mike, I'm in the exact same situation that you are. It's just like, I don't know how much of that. I mean, but I know I want to see Wonder Woman 84. I don't know. My cinema will not be open here in Harrisburg on December 25th. So
yeah.
I'm probably not going to get to see it in theaters. And so if I want to see it early, that's how I might have to see it. Then, of course, I do want to see Zack Snyder's Justice League next year. So that's where I'm going to have to, I'm going to have HBO Max at some point to see that. So I don't know. I'll probably, I was one of those people who thought, I'll wait for all that stuff to be there and then get the trial and then just not. Of course, they're not doing trials now. So wisely on their part.
Right.
So I don't know if I'm going to pick it up either. But
you can't cancel anything. So whether it's a trial or not, you can.
That's true.
You can subscribe and then drop it.
Yeah, 1 month. Will I subscribe for 1 month for $16? Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I mean, we did that for Game of Thrones. We subscribed to HBO for Game of Thrones for like 3 or 4 years. Before that, I read all the books and I'd wait for the it to come out on DVD. But then once the books and the TV show merged, I pretty much had to get HBO.
All right.
Yeah, and the thing is, again, like even when theaters open back up, I don't know if I want to go right away. I'm not going to be the first one in a seat. You know what I mean? For sure. So,
Chicken.
it'll be, hey, whatever.
Just going to take a camera with you.
Yeah, I've got people that are, at higher risk around me. So, yeah, I don't know. It'll just be weird when stuff does open back up, seeing how the recovery is. And, theater chains, of course, aren't doing that good this year, which is understandable. And, actually on Conan O'Brien, they just did a thing of like Andy Richter reviews the best movies of 2020. What came out? Did anything come out? It was kind of the joke. And it's like, yeah, that's good. It's like, are there going to be Oscars next year?
Yeah. Bloodshot.
Yeah, if they are, Bad Boys sweeps them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just like, it's weird. Like there was, speaking of movies and theaters and everything, there was a independent movie that came out during quarantine, and the people that made that movie bought out a theater and bought all the seats. So they had the number one movie that weekend because all the theaters were shut down. But on paper, in the books, they will have the number one movie. So when they go to make another movie, they can say, hey, we had the number one movie that weekend.
Yeah. Well, I think this was the first year that the United States didn't have the largest box office. I think China, for the first time, had the largest box office. So yeah, it's been a crazy year. I think, Dan, I think the last movie I saw was Bloodshot in the theaters. Was that the last one you saw too? Yeah.
Bloodshot was absolutely. I went with Matt. Who again
Yeah, well, I
been
was.
on the show for a while, needs to get back on here. But yeah, we went to see Bloodshot. We went and ate, and I started getting texts about, hey, they're shutting down restaurants. And it's like, really? It's like, yep. So this was, that was literally the last thing I did before
Raw.
Yeah, everything kind of got shut down that next day. So yeah,
you didn't remember I was there. You remembered Matt was there, but you didn't remember I was there.
Yeah, but it's letting our listener know.
The last one I seen was Birds of Prey, and that was out about a month before that, I guess. Yeah.
So yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how successful they consider these movies they're releasing this way too.
Yep.
Because it's like, box office is still important to movies, and to studios, and it's just like, well, how do you measure success? What are the metrics now for this sort of thing? Like I saw I don't know if they're re-releasing, but I'm seeing a lot of ads now for Tenet coming out on Blu-ray. And I know they had a really sort of truncated theater run with that this year. I don't know how long it was in theaters, but they did release it. And I know that, Christopher Nolan is an important director for Warner Brothers. Do they?
He's not happy about. He's not happy about.
Yeah, he's been vocal about the HBO Max deal. But then it's also like, well, did Tenet make its money back? Probably not in theaters.
Not, yeah.
Maybe it will digitally and on home video release, which again is another dwindling market right now.
Well, if this is the way moving forward that movies are going to be released, is that same day theater, streaming service, then regardless, the days of the $1 billion movie are done.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And then it's like, how do you gauge what you spend on these? What are the budgets of these movies now? What are you going to recoup from this?
Yep.
Do you see it as like, oh, I needed an instant return on my money, or is this, hey, this is something in our catalog now that we can monetize for years to come? I think, I don't want to, not to just bring this up to be morbid or anything, but I think we saw the last similar situation I can think of was what happened when Dark Knight Rises was released and the tragedy that came on opening night. And then it's like, okay, how does that affect ticket sales? Do you really know? Especially initially, when that kind of thing happens, it's like, did that affect the box office? Probably. There probably were people that heard about that, like, we're not going to go see that in the theater. You know what I mean? So, but again, I'm sure they've made their money back on that movie.
Yep.
And, again, they're still working with Christopher Nolan. It's not, it's not like the movie bombed or something. But, do they consider Tenet a success, with what's going on? So, yeah. We'll see. It's definitely different, as far as the movie industry and, how things work now. But
I was actually out there in Aurora about 4 days after that happened. Aurora, Colorado. I was out there at National Institute of Corrections, and the cab driver taking me from the airport to the hotel pointed out the theater, and he just, it really affected the community.
I'm sure.
Terribly, yeah.
Well, like I know, around here in Southern Illinois, there were people were seeing cops at the theaters that weekend. When that happened, probably afraid of a copycat or something like that. So I don't know. It's just weird. It's definitely unprecedented. And again, as digital streaming and everything becomes more lucrative for everybody and profitable, and they want more exclusives. Again, Netflix is sort of the weird model too of like they don't do advertising, so their revenue only increases when they get more subscribers. So that's why they have to have a big bump when they spend money on this stuff. Oh, actually, for Masters of the Universe fans, they keep talking about a movie for years now. The last thing I heard with that, kind of before everything happened, was the idea was, do we just release this movie on Netflix? I believe like Sony was supposed to be making the movie, but then they're like, well, if this movie goes straight to Netflix, this big budget movie, we only make what Netflix will pay for the movie. But does that save them from making a bomb at the theater on the box office, or are they limiting the potential profit they could have on this movie by only selling it to Netflix? So that's something that studios have to kind of consider now. And again, we're kind of talking about superhero movies here and, genre stuff. It's kind of our, focus here. But those are big budget things. And it's like, do they make their budgets back? Is it still profitable for the studios to spend the money on these, properties like this if they don't have a theatrical release? So.
Well, that was kind of a long way around talking about HBO Max coming to Roku, but
yeah. But yeah, it's on there now, which is good. I'm happy. I've complained about it enough online. I need to go on about how happy I am that it's there and convenient. Right. Here's another thing. There's what is it? It's not a Christmas special. They're doing a Doctor Who New Year's special, right?
Yeah, you said something about that.
Doctor Who's on HBO Max. When does the New Year's special drop on there? Will that be after it airs, or will that be like BBC has it for a while first or something? Or I wonder how that works out. Do I gotta wait till the summer to see the Doctor Who New Year's special? So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how quickly stuff goes up there too, because I know the fourth season of Rick and Morty showed up there a few weeks ago, and again that aired a while back now. So yeah, there's definitely a lag time, but I bet we see that sort of decrease as time goes on, and digital becomes the primary thing to watch some of this stuff.